Sometimes the smallest observations can unravel the biggest mysteries. What starts as a routine day can quickly transform into a life-changing moment that tests courage, reveals hidden truths, and shows us that heroes come in the most unexpected forms. This is the true story of Emma, a sharp-eyed young woman whose simple observation about a suspicious van would lead to discoveries that shook an entire community. It's a story about trust, danger, and the power of speaking up when something doesn't feel right. Most importantly, it's about how one person's refusal to ignore warning signs can save lives and expose secrets that some people will do anything to keep hidden. What you're about to read isn't just another story. It's a reminder that sometimes the most ordinary people find themselves in extraordinary situations, and that paying attention to your instincts might be the difference between safety and disaster. Emma Martinez had always been the type of person who noticed things others missed. Growing up in the small town of Millbrook, she had developed a habit of watching the world around her with careful attention. Her friends often joked that she would make a good detective someday, but Emma never thought much about it until that Tuesday morning in late September. The morning started like any other. Emma was walking to her job at the local library, taking her usual route through the residential area of Oak Street. The autumn air was crisp and the leaves were just beginning to change colors. She loved this walk because it gave her time to think and observe the quiet neighborhood coming to life. As she turned the corner onto Maple Avenue, something caught her eye. A white van was parked across the street from the elementary school, positioned in a way that gave whoever was inside a clear view of the playground and main entrance. What made Emma pause wasn't just the van itself, but the fact that she had seen it in the same spot 3 days in a row now. The van looked ordinary enough, no special markings, no company logos, just a plain white vehicle that could belong to anyone. But there were details that bothered Emma. The windows were tinted darker than normal, making it impossible to see inside. The license plate looked somehow wrong, though. She couldn't put her finger on why. Most importantly, the van was always there during the same time period, right when children were arriving at school. Emma tried to push the uneasy feeling away. Maybe it was just a parent waiting to pick up a child, or a maintenance worker taking a break. But something deep in her gut told her this wasn't normal. She had grown up in Millbrook, and she knew the rhythms of this neighborhood. This van didn't fit. That afternoon, as Emma walked home from work, she decided to take a different route that would take her past the school again. She wanted to see if the van was still there. As she approached the area, her heart rate quickened. The van was gone, but she noticed something else that made her stomach drop. There were fresh tire marks on the asphalt where the van had been parked, and they looked like they had been made by someone leaving quickly. The marks were dark and deep, suggesting rapid acceleration. Emma looked around and noticed that the spot where the van had been positioned gave a perfect view not just of the school entrance, but also of the path that many children took when walking home. Emma decided to ask around discreetly. She stopped by Mrs. Pocket, Henderson's house, an elderly woman who spent most of her day sitting by her front window, watching the neighborhood activity. Henderson had lived on this street for 40 years and knew everything that happened in the area. When Emma mentioned the white van, Mrs. Henderson's expression grew serious. She had noticed it too, and it had made her uncomfortable. She told Emma that the van had been appearing for about a week, always during school hours. What worried Mrs. Henderson most was that she had seen the van slowly driving through the neighborhood on several occasions, as if whoever was driving was studying the area. Mrs. Henderson also mentioned something that made Emma's blood run cold. She had seen a man get out of the van once, and he had been watching the children through a pair of binoculars. When Mrs. Henderson had stepped onto her porch to get a better look, the man quickly got back in the van and drove away. Emma felt a chill run down her spine. This was definitely not normal behavior, and she knew she needed to do something about it. But she also knew that she needed more information before she could convince anyone to take her seriously. The next morning, Emma deliberately left for work earlier than usual. She wanted to position herself where she could observe the area around the school without being obvious about it. She found a spot at the bus stop across from the school where she could pretend to be waiting for transportation while keeping an eye on the street. At exactly 8:15 a.m., the white van appeared. Emma felt her heart pounding as she watched it park in the same spot as before. This time, she was ready. She had brought a small notebook and pen, and she began documenting everything she could observe. The van sat there for nearly an hour. Emma could see that there was definitely someone inside, though the tinted windows made it impossible to make out any details about the person. What alarmed her most was the way the van was positioned. It had a clear sight line to the school entrance, the playground, and the main path that children used when walking to and from school. Around 9 a.m., something happened that confirmed Emma's worst fears. A group of elementary school children who had arrived late were walking toward the school entrance. As they approached, Emma noticed the van's engine start. The vehicle began to move slowly, following the children at a distance. When the children entered the school building, the van returned to its original parking spot. Emma's hands were shaking as she wrote down what she had observed. She knew without a doubt that this was predatory behavior, and she felt a wave of nausea thinking about what might be planned. She also felt a surge of determination. She was not going to let anything happen to those children. The problem was that Emma knew she needed proof before anyone would take her seriously. The police would need more than just her observations about a parked van to take action. She also knew that she was potentially putting herself in danger by investigating this situation, but she couldn't ignore what she was seeing. Emma decided to continue her observations for a few more days while also reaching out to other people in the community. She needed to build a case that was strong enough to convince the authorities to act. She also needed to be careful not to alert whoever was in the van that they were being watched. That evening, Emma made a decision that would change everything. She would document everything she observed about the van and its occupant, and she would find a way to get the authorities involved before something terrible happened. She had no idea that her careful observations were about to uncover something much larger and more dangerous than she had ever imagined. As she prepared for bed that night, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that time was running out. The behavior she had witnessed suggested that whoever was in the van was planning something, and she might be the only person who could prevent it. The weight of that responsibility felt enormous, but Emma knew she had no choice but to act. The next morning would bring new developments that would test Emma's courage and determination in ways she never expected. What she discovered about the van and its occupant would not only validate her instincts, but would also reveal a conspiracy that reached much deeper into her community than she had ever suspected. Little did Emma know that her decision to pay attention to her instincts about the white van would set in motion a series of events that would ultimately save lives and expose a network of criminals who had been operating in plain sight. Her story was just beginning, and the most challenging parts were still ahead. The following morning, Emma arrived at her observation point even earlier, determined to gather more concrete evidence. She had spent the night researching online about how to document suspicious activity and had prepared a more systematic approach to her surveillance. She brought a camera with a zoom lens, borrowed from her brother who worked as a freelance photographer. At 7:45 a.m., before the van's usual arrival time, Emma positioned herself at a different location, inside the coffee shop that had a clear view of the school area. She ordered a large coffee and settled into a corner table by the window, pretending to read a book while keeping her camera ready. Right on schedule, the white van appeared. This time, Emma was ready to capture evidence. As she carefully photographed the vehicle, she noticed details she had missed before. The license plate was definitely suspicious. It looked newer than the rest of the van, as if it had been recently replaced. She also observed that the driver seemed to be making notes or drawings, occasionally holding up what looked like a notepad. Emma's blood ran cold when she realized what the person in the van might be documenting. They appeared to be mapping the children's routines, noting which entrance they used, what times they arrived, and which paths they took. This wasn't just casual observation. It was systematic surveillance with a clear purpose. Around 8:30 a.m., something unexpected happened. A second vehicle arrived, a dark blue sedan that parked 2 blocks away from the van. Emma watched through her camera lens as a woman got out of the sedan and began walking in the direction of the van. The woman appeared to be in her 40s, dressed professionally, and carried a briefcase. Emma quickly repositioned herself to get a better angle and managed to photograph the woman approaching the van. She watched as the woman briefly spoke to whoever was inside the van, handed them what looked like documents, and then returned to her car. The entire exchange lasted less than 3 minutes, but it confirmed Emma's suspicion that this was an organized operation involving multiple people. After the woman left, the van remained in position for another hour, continuing its surveillance of the school. Emma documented everything, including the times, the license plates of both vehicles, and detailed descriptions of what she observed. When Emma arrived at work later that morning, she was visibly shaken. Her supervisor, Janet, noticed immediately and asked if everything was okay. Emma hesitated for a moment, then made a decision that would prove crucial to everything that followed. She told Janet everything she had observed. Janet listened with growing alarm. As the head librarian, she had worked closely with the school district for years and had attended numerous safety training sessions. She immediately recognized the seriousness of what Emma was describing and insisted that they contact the authorities right away. However, when they called the local police station, they encountered their first major obstacle. The officer who took their call was dismissive, suggesting that Emma might be overreacting to innocent activity. He pointed out that it wasn't illegal to park on a public street and that many people had legitimate reasons to be in the area during school hours. Frustrated but not deterred, Janet suggested they contact Detective Sarah Chen, who worked with the school district on safety issues. Detective Chen had a reputation for taking community concerns seriously, and Janet had worked with her on several occasions. When Detective Chen arrived at the library that afternoon, Emma presented all of her documentation, photographs, detailed notes, and a timeline of the van's appearances. The detective studied the evidence carefully, and Emma could see her expression grow more serious as she reviewed the materials. Detective Chen explained that Emma's observations showed clear patterns of behavior that were consistent with predatory surveillance. The systematic nature of the observation, the involvement of multiple people, and the apparent documentation of children's routines were all major red flags that warranted immediate investigation. However, Detective Chen also explained that they needed to be extremely careful in how they proceeded. If this was indeed a criminal operation, alerting the suspects that they were being watched could cause them to either disappear or accelerate whatever they were planning. The investigation would need to be conducted with the utmost discretion. Detective Chen asked Emma if she would be willing to continue her observations while working with law enforcement. Emma agreed immediately, despite feeling nervous about the potential danger. She knew that the children's safety was more important than her own comfort. Over the next 2 days, Emma worked closely with an undercover police team to monitor the situation. They provided her with better surveillance equipment and established communication protocols to ensure her safety. What they discovered during this period was even more alarming than Emma's initial observations. The surveillance revealed that the operation was much larger than initially suspected. In addition to the white van and blue sedan, they identified a third vehicle, a gray pickup truck that appeared to be conducting surveillance on different schools in the district. The coordination between the vehicles suggested a sophisticated network with specific roles and responsibilities. Most disturbing was the discovery that the suspects appeared to be focusing on particular children. The undercover team observed the van following several specific students as they walked home from school, always maintaining a distance that wouldn't appear suspicious to casual observers. The suspects were clearly studying these children's routines and identifying potential opportunities. Detective Chen brought in additional resources, including a FBI task force that specialized in crimes against children. The federal agents explained that what Emma had uncovered appeared to be part of a larger criminal network that had been operating across multiple states. Her observations had provided them with their first solid lead in months of investigation. The FBI team leader, Agent Rodriguez, met with Emma to discuss the next phase of the investigation. He explained that her continued cooperation would be crucial, but that the operation was about to become much more dangerous. The suspects they were tracking were part of a sophisticated criminal organization, and they would not hesitate to harm anyone they perceived as a threat. Despite the risks, Emma agreed to continue working with law enforcement. She knew that backing down now could mean that other children in other communities would become victims. Agent Rodriguez arranged for Emma to have protection and established emergency protocols in case the situation became dangerous. The breakthrough came on Friday of that week. Emma was conducting her usual morning surveillance when she noticed something different. Instead of the usual lone occupant, there were now 2 people in the van. Through her enhanced camera equipment, she could see them more clearly than before. What she saw made her heart race. One of the people in the van was wearing what appeared to be a school district uniform, the type worn by maintenance workers or substitute teachers. This meant that whoever was involved in this operation had access to the school building and possibly to the children themselves. Emma immediately contacted Detective Chen, who dispatched the undercover team to the scene. What happened next would test everyone's ability to remain calm and follow protocol while children's lives hung in the balance. The person in the school district uniform got out of the van and began walking toward the school building. Emma watched in horror as this individual, who appeared to have legitimate access to the school, approached the main entrance where dozens of children were arriving for the day. The undercover team faced a terrible dilemma. They couldn't risk allowing a potential predator into the school, but moving too quickly might compromise the larger investigation and allow other members of the criminal network to escape. The next few minutes would determine whether Emma's brave decision to speak up would result in preventing a tragedy or if they were already too late to stop whatever had been planned. As Emma watched the situation unfold, she realized that her simple observation about a suspicious van had uncovered something much more sinister than anyone had imagined. The next phase of this investigation would require courage from everyone involved, and the stakes couldn't be higher. The tension in the air was thick as Emma watched the person in the school district uniform approach the building. Detective Chen was coordinating with the undercover team through her radio, her voice tight with controlled urgency. Every second felt like an eternity as they tried to balance the need for immediate action with the requirements of the larger investigation. Agent Rodriguez made the decision that would define the next phase of the operation. He instructed the school to implement a lockdown procedure under the guise of a routine drill, while simultaneously having undercover officers approach the individual who was attempting to enter the building. The goal was to intercept the suspect without alerting the occupants of the van that law enforcement was involved. Emma watched through her camera as the plan unfolded. Two undercover officers dressed as maintenance workers approached the suspect just as he reached the school entrance. From her position, Emma could see the brief conversation that took place, though she couldn't hear the words being exchanged. What happened next shocked everyone involved in the surveillance. Instead of complying with the officer's request to see identification, the suspect suddenly turned and ran toward the street where the van was waiting. The driver of the van, seeing the commotion, immediately started the engine and began to pull away from the curb. The careful surveillance operation suddenly became a high-stakes chase. Detective Chen called for backup units while the undercover team pursued both the running suspect and the fleeing van. Emma found herself in the unique position of being the only civilian witness to events that were now unfolding rapidly across multiple locations. The running suspect was apprehended within 2 blocks of the school, but not before he had thrown away what appeared to be a bag or package. The van, meanwhile, had managed to escape the immediate area, though law enforcement had successfully identified the license plate and were tracking it through the city's traffic camera system. Agent Rodriguez arrived at Emma's location within minutes of the arrest. He explained that they needed her to help them understand exactly what had transpired during the morning's events. Emma's detailed documentation and photographic evidence were now crucial pieces of evidence in what had become an active criminal investigation. The bag that the suspect had discarded contained materials that confirmed everyone's worst fears. Inside were detailed floor plans of the elementary school, photographs of specific children, and what appeared to be schedules of various school activities. Most disturbing were handwritten notes that suggested the suspect had been planning to gain access to the school during a time when security would be minimal. Emma felt sick as she realized how close the community had come to experiencing a tragedy. Her decision to trust her instincts and report her observations had literally prevented something terrible from happening. But Agent Rodriguez explained that the investigation was far from over. They still needed to track down the van and identify all the members of the criminal network. Over the next several hours, Emma worked closely with the FBI team to analyze all of her surveillance footage and photographs. Her meticulous documentation proved invaluable in helping law enforcement understand the full scope of the operation they had uncovered. The analysis revealed disturbing patterns that extended beyond the immediate threat to the elementary school. The suspects had been conducting surveillance on multiple schools throughout the district, and they appeared to have been building detailed profiles of children from various backgrounds and circumstances. Most shocking was the discovery that this criminal network had connections to similar operations in other states. Emma's observations had helped uncover what appeared to be a coordinated effort targeting children across a wide geographic area. The FBI task force explained that networks like this often operated for months or years before anyone noticed their activities. Late that afternoon, law enforcement achieved a major breakthrough in tracking the white van. Traffic cameras had followed its route to an industrial area on the outskirts of town, where it had entered a warehouse complex. Surveillance of the area revealed significant activity, suggesting that this location might serve as a base of operations for the criminal network. Agent Rodriguez asked Emma if she would be willing to help identify individuals and vehicles from her surveillance footage, as law enforcement prepared to investigate the warehouse complex. Emma agreed, though she was beginning to understand that her involvement in this case would extend far beyond her initial observations. The raid on the warehouse complex took place that evening. So, Emma wasn't present for the operation, but Detective Chen kept her informed of the developments as they unfolded. What law enforcement discovered inside the warehouse exceeded their worst expectations. The facility contained sophisticated surveillance equipment, computers with detailed information about hundreds of children, and evidence of coordination with criminal networks in multiple states. Most disturbing was the discovery of materials suggesting that the network had been planning coordinated operations targeting schools in several communities simultaneously. The scale of the criminal enterprise was staggering. What had started as Emma's observation about a suspicious van had led to the exposure of a network that threatened children across multiple states. Law enforcement arrested 7 individuals that evening, including the person who had attempted to enter the elementary school. However, the investigation also revealed that several key members of the network had escaped. The careful surveillance that Emma had observed was part of a larger operation that included lookouts and escape plans. While the immediate threat had been neutralized, law enforcement knew that other members of the network were still at large. Agent Rodriguez met with Emma the following morning to discuss the ongoing investigation. He explained that her testimony would be crucial in the prosecution of the individuals who had been arrested. He also warned her that she might need to remain vigilant, as criminal networks sometimes targeted people who had helped expose their operations. Emma felt overwhelmed by the magnitude of what her simple observation had uncovered. She had started out concerned about a suspicious van near a school, and now she was a key witness in a federal investigation involving a multi-state criminal network targeting children. The emotional impact was significant. Emma found herself thinking constantly about what might have happened if she hadn't trusted her instincts, or if she had decided that the suspicious activity wasn't her concern. The realization that her actions had potentially saved children's lives was both empowering and deeply sobering. Detective Chen arranged for Emma to speak with a counselor who specialized in helping civilian witnesses cope with the psychological effects of being involved in serious criminal investigations. Emma appreciated this support, as she was experiencing stress symptoms she hadn't expected. The community response to the news of the criminal network was intense. Parents were grateful that a tragedy had been prevented, but they were also shocked to learn how close their children had come to being victimized. The school district implemented additional security measures and began working with law enforcement to identify any other potential threats. Emma's role in exposing the criminal network became public knowledge, and she found herself being praised as a hero by community members and local media. While she appreciated the recognition, Emma was uncomfortable with the attention and preferred to focus on the fact that law enforcement professionals had done the difficult and dangerous work of actually stopping the criminals. The investigation continued over the following weeks as law enforcement worked to track down the remaining members of the criminal network. Emma continued to provide assistance when needed, helping to identify individuals and vehicles from her surveillance documentation. What she learned during this period was that her careful observations had been even more significant than anyone initially realized. The timing of her discovery had prevented not just a single incident, but had disrupted a coordinated operation that could have affected children in multiple communities. As the third phase of this incredible story drew to a close, Emma began to understand that her experience would have lasting effects on her life and on her community. The final phase would reveal the full impact of her courage and determination to act on her instincts, and would demonstrate how one person's refusal to ignore warning signs could create ripple effects that extended far beyond anything she had ever imagined. 3 months after Emma's initial observation about the suspicious white van, the full scope of what she had helped uncover continued to unfold. The FBI investigation had expanded to include law enforcement agencies in 12 different states, and the criminal network she had exposed was found to be far more extensive than anyone had initially realized. Agent Rodriguez scheduled a meeting with Emma to update her on the progress of the investigation and to prepare her for the upcoming trials. The conference room at the FBI field office was filled with evidence boards, photographs, and documents that represented months of investigative work that had all started with Emma's careful observations. The news that Agent Rodriguez shared was both encouraging and sobering. The 7 individuals arrested in the initial raid had provided information that led to the identification and arrest of 23 additional suspects across multiple states. The criminal network had been operating for over 3 years, and investigators estimated that Emma's actions had prevented dozens of potential crimes against children. However, the investigation had also revealed the sophisticated nature of the criminal organization. They had used advanced technology to coordinate their activities, had developed detailed profiles of hundreds of children, and had established operations in communities where they believed law enforcement surveillance would be minimal. The network had specifically targeted small towns and suburban areas where unusual activity might not be noticed as quickly as it would be in larger cities. Emma learned that her instinct to document everything she observed had been crucial to the success of the investigation. Her photographs and detailed notes had provided law enforcement with evidence that would have been impossible to obtain through other means. The systematic way she had approached her surveillance had given investigators a clear timeline of the criminal network's activities. The trials of the arrested suspects began 6 months after the initial arrests. Emma was called to testify in several of the cases, and she found the experience both challenging and empowering. Standing in the courtroom and describing what she had observed felt like the final step in a journey that had begun with a simple feeling that something wasn't right. During her testimony, Emma explained to the jury how she had first noticed the van and what had motivated her to continue observing and documenting the suspicious activity. She described the careful surveillance she had conducted and the evidence she had gathered that ultimately led to the exposure of the criminal network. The defense attorneys attempted to characterize Emma's actions as those of an overly suspicious individual who had misinterpreted innocent behavior. However, the overwhelming evidence gathered during the investigation, combined with Emma's detailed documentation, made it clear that her observations had been accurate and that her concerns had been completely justified. The trials resulted in convictions for all of the primary suspects. The individual who had attempted to enter the elementary school while wearing a school district uniform received the longest sentence, 25 years in federal prison. The sentences for the other members of the network ranged from 8 to 20 years, depending on their level of involvement and the specific crimes they had committed. Judge Patricia Williams, who presided over the primary trial, made special note of Emma's contribution during the sentencing hearing. She stated that Emma's willingness to trust her instincts and take action when she observed suspicious behavior had potentially saved the lives of dozens of children. The judge emphasized that communities depend on citizens like Emma, who are willing to speak up when they notice something that doesn't seem right. The impact of Emma's actions extended far beyond the criminal prosecutions. The school district where she had first observed the van implemented new security protocols based on lessons learned from the investigation. These changes included improved communication systems between schools and law enforcement, enhanced training for staff to recognize suspicious behavior, and new procedures for verifying the credentials of individuals who request access to school buildings. Other school districts throughout the region adopted similar measures after learning about the criminal network that had been operating in their area. Emma was invited to speak at several school board meetings and parent organization events to share her experience and help educate others about the importance of reporting suspicious activity. Emma also worked with Detective Chen and Agent Rodriguez to develop educational materials for community groups about how to recognize and report potential threats to children's safety. These materials emphasize that ordinary citizens could play a crucial role in protecting their communities by paying attention to their surroundings and trusting their instincts when something seemed wrong. The psychological counseling that Emma had received during the investigation proved to be valuable in helping her process the emotional impact of her experience. She learned that it was normal for civilian witnesses to experience stress and anxiety after being involved in serious criminal investigations, and she developed coping strategies that helped her manage these feelings. Emma's employer, the public library, recognized her contributions to community safety by presenting her with a special award for civic responsibility. The library board noted that Emma had demonstrated the values of public service and community engagement that were central to the library's mission. Local law enforcement agencies also recognized Emma's contributions. Detective Chen nominated Emma for a Citizens Award presented annually by the police department to community members who had made significant contributions to public safety. At the award ceremony, Police Chief Martin emphasized that successful law enforcement requires partnership between police officers and engaged citizens who are willing to report suspicious activity. The media attention that Emma received helped spread awareness about the importance of community vigilance in protecting children's safety. She was interviewed by several news outlets and appeared on a regional television program that focused on community safety issues. While Emma remained somewhat uncomfortable with the public attention, she recognized that sharing her story could help educate others and potentially prevent similar situations in other communities. Emma also maintained contact with Mrs. Henderson, the elderly neighbor who had confirmed her initial observations about the van. Henderson had also been called to testify during the trials, and her testimony had corroborated Emma's account of the suspicious activity. The two women developed a friendship based on their shared experience and their mutual commitment to keeping their neighborhood safe. 1 year after the initial discovery, Emma reflected on how much her life had changed as a result of her decision to report her observations about the suspicious van. She had learned a great deal about the criminal justice system, had developed new relationships with law enforcement professionals, and had gained a deeper understanding of the importance of community engagement in ensuring public safety. Emma's experience also influenced her career path. Inspired by her involvement in the investigation, she decided to pursue additional education in criminal justice and community safety. She enrolled in evening classes at a nearby college and began working toward a degree that would allow her to work more directly in the field of community safety and crime prevention. The criminal network that Emma had helped expose was ultimately dismantled completely. The final arrests were made 18 months after Emma's initial observation, and law enforcement agencies across multiple states were able to confirm that the threat had been eliminated. The investigation also led to improvements in information sharing between law enforcement agencies and enhanced protocols for tracking criminal networks that operate across state lines. Emma's story became part of the training curriculum for law enforcement agencies in the region. New officers learned about the importance of taking seriously reports from citizens who observe suspicious activity, and experienced officers were reminded that some of the most significant breakthroughs in criminal investigations come from the observations of alert community members. The impact of Emma's actions continued to ripple through her community long after the immediate threat had been resolved. Parents became more aware of the importance of teaching their children about safety, while also recognizing that community vigilance could help protect all children. Teachers and school administrators received additional training about recognizing and reporting suspicious behavior around schools. Emma's experience demonstrated that ordinary people have the power to make extraordinary differences in their communities when they trust their instincts and take appropriate action. Her story became an inspiration to others who might be hesitant to report suspicious activity or who might doubt whether their observations could be significant. Looking back on the entire experience, Emma felt grateful that she had trusted her instincts about the white van. She knew that her decision to pay attention to her surroundings and report her concerns had prevented a tragedy and had helped protect children in communities across multiple states. While she never sought recognition for her actions, Emma was proud that she had played a role in making her community safer. The story of Emma Martinez and her observation of a suspicious van serves as a powerful reminder that community safety depends on citizens who are willing to be alert, engaged, and courageous enough to speak up when something doesn't seem right. Her experience shows that sometimes the most important contributions to public safety come not from law enforcement professionals, but from ordinary people who refuse to ignore their instincts and who understand that protecting children is everyone's responsibility.